For many years, a quiet conflict has simmered between Israel and Iran. This was often called a shadow war, fought through secret operations, cyber attacks, and proxy forces across the Middle East. However, this long-standing tension has now erupted into direct military confrontation. The events of the past few days mark a dangerous new chapter in their rivalry. What was once a conflict fought in the shadows is now a direct and open fight. This escalation brings the entire region to a state of high alert, as the world watches with deep concern over what might happen next in this volatile situation. The recent flare-up began with a significant Israeli military operation. Israel stated that its actions were necessary to protect its national security. It claimed to have intelligence that Iran was incredibly close to developing nuclear weapons. This fear has been at the heart of Israeli policy for decades. The Israeli government believes that a nuclear-armed Iran would pose an existential threat not just to Israel, but to the stability of the entire world. This belief drove them to take dramatic and direct military action, moving beyond their previous strategies of covert strikes and sabotage operations. This direct attack represents a major shift in strategy. Previously, both nations avoided direct, large-scale military clashes. They understood that such a conflict could easily spiral out of control, leading to a much wider and more destructive war. But the recent strikes show that this unspoken rule has been broken. The risk of miscalculation is now extremely high. Every action taken by one side is being met with an immediate and forceful reaction from the other, creating a cycle of violence that is difficult to stop. The international community is now grappling with how to de-escalate this crisis before it consumes the region. The world is now forced to confront the reality of this open conflict. The implications are enormous, not just for the Middle East, but for global security and economies. Diplomatic efforts are underway, but the rhetoric from both sides remains harsh and uncompromising. The shadow war provided a certain, albeit fragile, level of stability. Now, with open attacks, the situation is far more unpredictable. The international community must navigate this perilous new landscape, hoping to find a path away from a full-scale regional war that no one can truly afford to fight. The escalation began on Friday, June 13, 2025, when Israel launched a major air assault on targets inside Iran. According to Iranian officials, these strikes were extensive and deadly. They reported that the attacks killed 78 people and left more than 320 wounded. The casualties were not just military personnel. Iran stated that many civilians were among the victims. Furthermore, Iran claimed that the strikes specifically targeted senior military officials and, crucially, some of its top nuclear scientists. This targeting suggests a clear Israeli objective: to cripple both Iran's military leadership and its scientific ability to advance its nuclear program. Iran's response was swift and powerful. It did not wait long to retaliate for the Israeli attack. Over Friday night and into Saturday, Iran launched multiple waves of missiles and drones aimed at Israel. Air raid sirens blared across major Israeli cities, including Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, as residents sought shelter from the incoming barrage. Explosions were reported in Tehran as well, with some projectiles reportedly hitting near Mehrabad Airport, an area close to government buildings and a key Air Force base. The attacks demonstrated Iran's capability and willingness to strike directly at the heart of Israel, a significant escalation in its military posture. The damage and casualties on both sides paint a grim picture of the escalating violence. While Iran suffered a high death toll from the initial Israeli strikes, the impact in Israel was less severe in terms of human life, though still significant. Israeli officials reported 1 person killed and 34 injured, most with minor injuries. Israel credited its advanced air defense systems, like the Iron Dome, with intercepting the vast majority of the incoming Iranian missiles. The United States military also confirmed its forces assisted in these defensive operations, highlighting the close security alliance between the United States and Israel during this critical moment. This direct exchange of fire marks a terrifying new phase. For the first time, both countries have engaged in large-scale, overt military strikes on each other's sovereign territory. Iran's multi-wave missile assault was a clear message that it would not absorb an Israeli attack without a punishing response. The back-and-forth nature of these assaults has created a dangerous cycle of retaliation. Each attack seems to demand an even stronger counterattack, pushing both nations further down a path toward a wider and more devastating conflict that could destabilize the entire Middle East. Both Israel and Iran have publicly defended their aggressive military actions, each framing themselves as the victim acting in self-defense. Israel's envoy to the United Nations, Danny Danon, described the attack on Iran as an act of national preservation. He claimed that Israeli intelligence showed Iran was only days away from being able to produce enough fissile material for several nuclear bombs. From Israel's perspective, this was a preemptive strike born out of necessity, a last resort to prevent what it sees as an imminent and existential threat. This justification is central to Israel's longtime stance on Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran, on the other hand, vehemently condemned the Israeli attack as an act of war. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei squarely blamed Israel for starting the conflict. Iran's UN envoy, Amir Saeed Iravani, accused the United States of being complicit in the Israeli strike, warning that Washington would be held responsible for the consequences. Senior Iranian officials have issued stark threats, vowing a painful revenge and declaring that no location within Israel is safe from their reach. Iran maintains that its nuclear program is for peaceful civilian energy purposes, and that Israel's attack was an unprovoked act of aggression against a sovereign nation. The United States has found itself in a difficult position, trying to support its ally, Israel, while also attempting to prevent a full-blown regional war. United States officials confirmed their military's involvement in helping Israel intercept the Iranian missiles, a clear demonstration of their commitment to Israeli security. However, President Donald Trump also extended an olive branch, suggesting it was not too late for Iran to de-escalate. He pointed to ongoing negotiations aimed at halting Iran's uranium enrichment program, hinting that a diplomatic solution, specifically a new nuclear deal, was still possible if Iran chose to step back from the brink of war. The international community is watching this rapid escalation with alarm. World leaders are calling for restraint from both sides, fearing the conflict could spill over into neighboring countries and disrupt global stability. The United Nations Security Council is holding emergency meetings to address the crisis, though finding consensus is difficult. The starkly different narratives presented by Israel and Iran highlight the deep-seated animosity and mistrust that fuel this conflict. Each side believes its actions are justified, making it incredibly challenging for diplomats to find common ground for de-escalation. At the very core of this explosive conflict is Iran's nuclear program. For years, Israel has watched with growing alarm as Iran has expanded its nuclear capabilities. Israel, widely believed to possess its own undeclared nuclear arsenal, is adamant that it cannot allow its regional adversary to acquire the same power. Israeli leaders fear that a nuclear-armed Iran would not only threaten Israel's existence directly, but would also trigger a dangerous nuclear arms race across the entire Middle East. This deep-seated fear is the primary driver behind Israel's aggressive military posture and its justification for the recent strikes on Iranian soil. Iran has consistently and publicly maintained that its nuclear program is entirely for peaceful purposes. It claims its goal is to generate electricity for its growing population and to produce medical isotopes for treating diseases like cancer. Tehran insists it has no intention of building nuclear weapons and points to its obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as proof of its peaceful intent. However, its past secrecy and restrictions on international inspectors have created deep suspicion, particularly in the West and in Israel. This fundamental disagreement over the program's true purpose remains the central, unresolved issue fueling the conflict. The potential for this conflict to widen is immense and deeply worrying for the entire world. A full-scale war between Israel and Iran would not be contained within their borders. It would almost certainly draw in other countries and actors. Iran has powerful proxy forces across the region, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, and various militias in Syria and Iraq, which could open new fronts against Israel. The conflict could also disrupt global oil supplies, as critical shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf, like the Strait of Hormuz, could become a war zone, causing a spike in energy prices and damaging the global economy. This is why the conflict between Israel and Iran matters to everyone, far beyond the Middle East. It is not just a regional dispute, it has global consequences. The risk of a miscalculation leading to a catastrophic war is higher now than it has been in decades. Such a war would cause immense human suffering, create a massive refugee crisis, and have devastating economic impacts worldwide. the international community faces the urgent challenge of pulling both nations back from the edge, encouraging dialogue over destruction, and finding a diplomatic solution before this dangerous escalation spirals completely out of control.